Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Nightmare Alley, a graphic novel that adapts the great famous noir novel by William Lindsay Gresham. And it's adapted by Spain Rodriguez, the great underground comic book artist known for, he was one of the Zap cartoonists. He did Trash Man. He's just done hundreds of great comics over the decades. One of the all-time greats of underground comics. This has an interesting publication history, this book. In the early 90s, Bob Callahan and Art Spiegelman was kind of involved too. They made a deal with a big book publisher, a mainstream book publisher, to publish some graphic novels that would all be noir, mysteries / noir. It was called Neon Lit, and they put out some great stuff. They put out City of Glass, Perdita de Durango, and I guess they didn't sell well, so they went out of business. But before they did, they commissioned Tom DeHaven, the great writer, to adapt this novel into comic form, and then Mark Zingarelli was going to draw it. And Mark Zingarelli had to step down, and they got Spain. Spain was interested in doing it, but he said, only if I can adapt it myself. I don't want to have to deal with anyone else's outline, So he did, and he started working on it in the mid-90s, and he was almost done. And before he could finish, though, Neon Lit went out of business. So this was just in limbo for, I don't know, 7 to 8 years or something. And then luckily, Fantagraphics Books in 2003 got the rights to publish it and put this out. And it's a great adaptation. It's a great story. It really is just a classic noir, a very dark noir story. Just lots of dark psychological stuff going on with these characters. And the movie's really great. If you've ever seen it, it's 1947. The novel came out in 46, the original novel. A year later, it was adapted into a film starring Tyrone Power. Really great noir film. Highly recommended. So, nice cover by Spain. And let's crack this open. Here's the title page. Really love this logo. I think Spain did that. And we have a nice introduction from Gary Groth, giving us all the history that I just told you about, how the book came to be, how the movie came to be. They even have some film stills. Very informative. And here we begin. We start off with a nightmare sequence, and I love this image. We see our protagonist, Stanton Carlisle. Stan is running through this carnival midway, and these arms are all reaching out for him. That's just a great panel. And they close in on him, and he's running towards this light. And he wakes up terrified in bed. So Stan works in the carnival, and I guess he's been having these nightmares ever since he was a little boy, where he's running through some scary alleyway or, anywhere, but he's always running towards light, which he can never quite reach. So Stan is the assistant to Xena. She's the occultist, medium, fortune teller of the circus. And he gathers the questions from the crowd. And it's, he knows the whole scam. It's a scam, of course. So, he's pretty good at what he does. And we see how the whole operation works. We also meet other people from the carnival. We meet Xena. I'm sorry, not Xena. We meet Molly. She's basically, she's in the freak show, but she's not a freak. She just, they pump electricity through her. I'd like to actually see this. And her hair just goes crazy. So the way we're introduced to all these other characters is Stan, is done for his job for the day. And he's just walking through the midway, checking out everyone. And he ends up at the lowest form of circus freak, the geek. And we see the geek biting the head off of a chicken, which is what they were known for doing, and wallowing in their own filth. They were basically like a cautionary tale on two legs, geeks. People would just go to see them to be like, oh man, I guess things aren't going so bad for me. I could be that guy. I like this, the art. There's an interesting thing Spain does that he usually doesn't. This is like over, I think, like 128 pages, by far the longest thing Spain's ever drawn. And so I'm pretty sure he came up with this just to save time, but it's a great effect. I love when cartoonists do this, and where to show perspective and depth, not perspective, I guess I meant depth. You know, the people in the background are drawn just as like outlines, really well drawn outlines. I mean, Spain is just a master. But then the stuff in the foreground is totally beautifully shaded and drawn. So it really gives this great sense of depth. But I have a feeling he just did this so he could draw quicker. We meet Clem Hotley, he's the barker, the main carnival barker. And Stan asks him, he's like, so how do you like get these geeks? You find guys who like to bite the heads off chickens? And he's like, no, don't be stupid. I mean, they're basically just all drunks and drug addicts who are so desperate and pathetic that for a bottle a day, they'll do the most demeaning, degrading things. No one starts off as a geek. But, and he tells them the whole way they like kind of lure people into being geeks. And what they tell them to convince these guys to like just give up all of their dignity. It's kind of nasty. I love this. He's basically saying at the end, he's just like, yeah, you know, any drunk, you know, when he gets to that level, he'll geek, trust me. He'll protest at first, but they'll eventually be biting the heads off a chicken. Because that's what, you know, degenerate alcoholics and drug users, they just do terrible things. We also meet Bruno Hertz, the strong man, who, through his thought balloons, we quickly find out that he's in love with Molly, the electric girl. We meet Major Mosquito, Joe Plasky, who's got these shriveled up little legs, basically no legs to really speak of, and Sailor Martin, the tattoo man. We quickly realized, too, from Molly's thought balloons that something's not right with her. She's got some issues. She's right here. She's thinking, if only Daddy were here. And we'll see more of that later. So they're traveling in between towns. And this is a nice way to just show their personalities, their character through their dialogue. Xena seems like a very just sweet, great woman. She's just always trying to help people. And Molly is just a total sweetheart. She's just this kind of innocent young girl. Man, I love looking at Spain's art. It's so good. So we see Molly. Here she's thinking, I want Dad. God, how I want him here. I don't want it that way the first time. I mustn't be a tramp, Dad. Because they're trying to convince her to date the strong man, Hertz. And, you know, she's very resistant. She's obviously has some kind of daddy issues, and she probably could be a virgin for all we know. She has a little flashback to her growing up with her father. Apparently her father was a total con man. He was a grifter, and he would involve her in his little grifts. Like, she knew. And so she has a very interesting, strange childhood. We're seeing the guy set up camp at the new location, and we meet Xena without her like medium outfit on. She looks very different. So she's married to this guy. I'll get his name in a second. And he's a total drunk. Oh, I'm sorry. His name's Pete. Pete is this total sad drunk. And their relationship's so interesting because Zena's just totally in love with him. And she just takes care of him. She knows he's a pathetic drunk. He just basically shows up drunk all the time and hungover and just says, Zena, can I get $3? And she knows he's going to try to find booze. But she's trying to keep booze away from him. Almost everyone in the circus knows, don't give Pete any booze. So she's just totally mothers him, you know. She basically gives him money so he can eat breakfast. So Zena and Stan walk off, and they start macking at each other. So Zena, you know, she's totally in love with her husband, but, you know, she's got her needs. So they hook up. But they got to be very careful. Nobody can find out. They almost get caught by Pete at one point. And then Stan has a flashback to his childhood. We see his mother, who was a singer, very beautiful, and his father was kind of a bigwig, kind of a mover and a shaker. We find out that his mother would take singing lessons from Mr. Humphrey. And Stan always knew something was weird about that. They were always hanging out. The father was a total religious fanatic, kind of an angry, brutal man. He would be yelling at the mom. And the one silver lining to his childhood was his dog, Jip. This is really interesting. From reading this graphic novel, I find out that Spain, who's such a great artist, he can draw almost everything. He can't draw dogs. I figure, you know, Spain's an underground cartoonist. He pretty much drew whatever he wanted to draw his whole life. But drawing, illustrating someone else's stories, he's got to draw things that maybe he doesn't want to draw, like a dog, for example. And I'm curious to look through Spain's work. I don't think he's ever drawn a dog before, because we'll see other examples where Chip is so badly drawn. It's just weird how good he is at drawing almost everything, but he can't draw a dog. I like this little montage of the circus, just all the various workers doing what they do. The weeks go by. Stan is really learning the grift business. He's really learning all of the tricks of the trade. And we find out Stan's pretty smart. At least he has a great memory. But he's a pretty sharp guy. So he's picking all of this stuff up really quickly. I kind of like this scene, just Zena explaining to Stan why it's so easy to do what they do. Because just basically most people aren't happy and they're seeking answers. So it's not too hard getting money out of them if you promise them that. You give them a little hope. So it's all basically just understanding human psychology. That's what being a good carny / grifter is all about. So Stan is kind of becoming obsessed with Zena. He's pretty into her, but she's can barely see him. You know, basically most of her life is working or taking care of her pathetic husband, who she loves. And every now and then she can steal away to have a little tryst with him, but he just can't stop thinking about her. And it's driving him crazy that she doesn't have more time for him. I really like this panel of the carnival, just all this various stuff going on. Oh, God, Pete's so pathetic, so sad. Yeah, like Zena would cancel a date with him just because Pete's shirt needed a button sewed on. You know, like, that's how she dotes on him. So one night, Zena's got to go into town to go to the drugstore. And then we find out, like, what Stan's really capable of. He's not a good man. He fills up this bottle with like wood alcohol and gives it to Pete. Some of this illustration is so good. That almost looks like black and white Corbin to me. Pete tells Stan about the old days when him and Xena had this amazing act on the vaudeville stage. They were making money hand over fist. But he obviously hit the bottle and ruined everything. And Stan leaves Pete just blubbering. He realizes what a pathetic drunk he is. What a loser. So Stan meets Xena later, and they have sex again. The next morning, Major Mosquito wakes up Stan and says, Pete's dead. The stinking old rum pot, he got into a bottle of wood alcohol. At the funeral, just from their thought balloons, we realize these Carnies they're not the nicest people. None of them are sympathetic. They're all just thinking about like, oh man, at least this happened on a slow night at the carnival. It won't cut into the profits that much. Everyone's just thinking thoughts like that, just kind of selfish. Now we see Molly again, and we see a flashback of Molly as a child. Her father saw to it that she had singing and dancing lessons. And when she was 16, her father died. They sent her to live with her grandparents, but it's kind of implied by this panel that it looks like the grandfather was kind of perving on her. So she ran away to the circus. She was part of the Hooch show, which I guess every circus just basically had like a sexy burlesque act. It was run by Doc Abernathy. Unfortunately, Doc Abernathy took a liking to Molly, and so Doc Abernathy's girlfriend got really jealous and basically started beating her up all the time, and she just couldn't continue working there. And that's where Xena first met her, took her under her wing, and made up this act for her, the electricity one. And look how beautifully drawn that train is. Much better than that dog. It's a poker game between the roustabouts and or whatever, the Carnies. Get a little more character development of them. Something happens with the playing cards, and Xena shows up and she says, oh, you know, you can use tarot cards as playing cards. I don't know if that's true. And she starts doing readings for people, and it's kind of freaking people out. And so now that Pete's out of the picture, Stan is, has a lot more time with Xena. He's also kind of become, he's moved up in the circus. He's honing his skills as a magician, and he's helping Xena more in the act. And the whole reason he killed Pete is he gets to be with Xena more. So Xena really loved this guy Pete. I mean, she cries every night thinking about him. She misses him. I guess Pete was her mentor at one time when he was on the ball, and he helped her out a lot. That's why she, always wanted to help him. So the carnival moves to the deep, deep south, and here we see Stan still having that nightmare where he's running down an alley towards this light. And Stan's getting really good at the act. He's doing good. We see some of the conflict with some of the townies, which would always happen in a carnival milieu. And then the cops show up. They're going to bust the carnival for indecency because of Molly's outfit. Molly can't wear normal cloth because it'll catch fire. So she wears this thing, as you've seen. It kind of looks like a bondage outfit. It's like rubber and leather, I think. But then Stan just inserts himself in the situation. And he smooth talks the sheriff. And then on top of that, he basically starts doing a reading on the sheriff. And Stan is just really damn good at this point. And he totally does this reading to the sheriff, and the sheriff is like, holy shit, you totally know everything about me. Like, he's a believer. I wanted to bring this up. I almost wished maybe Tom DeHaven adapted this novel, because Spain does this all the time in here. Instead of like breaking this up into like maybe a few panels, he could have split this dialogue up. Look at that balloon. That's like late level Steve Ditko. Well, this one especially, it's crowding the art out. But there's a lot of panels in here where it's like, dude, you should never have a panel with a word balloon that big. Nobody wants to read that. Even though the writing is just fine, but it's not good comic book storytelling in my book. So the cops, the sheriff is totally won over. The sheriff is like, you know, well, you're not going to get any more trouble from us in the future. Anyone gives you trouble, you come call me. You guys can operate as long as you want here. And Stan walks back towards the tents, and Molly's waiting for him. And she says, Stan, you were so great. She's like looking at him like the knight in shining armor. She says, oh, Stan, you're so much like my dad. And then she says, don't hurt me, Stan. Don't. Oh, Stan, hurt me, hurt me, hurt me. So we realize Molly's pretty damaged. So they start a little affair now. And pretty soon everyone in the circus knows it, in the carnival. And Stan tells everyone they're going to go to vaudeville. They're hitting the big time with their act. Xena totally congratulates her. She's not even jealous. But the poor strong man is heartbroken because he loved Molly. So off they go to Broadway, and it looks like they're doing great. I love this little montage, very much like a 30s Warner Brothers movie or something, you know. Really nice design. And here they are, packing theaters, really raking in the dough. They're doing great, their act. But obviously time has passed, and Stan is just treating Molly like shit. He just talks down to her, basically verbally abusive to her. Stan has another flashback to his childhood. Look at that, another poorly drawn dog there. And just kind of reinforces that he's kind of got mommy issues himself. So their gigs keep getting fancier and fancier. They're doing private gigs at like millionaires' mansions and stuff. Scamming the swells. They happen to own a dog, so Spain could poorly draw it. Oh my God. It looks kind of cute though, I gotta say. So Molly has qualms about all this because she's a sweet young woman, and he's always got to convince her, like, oh, come on, honey, just one more scam. You know, we gotta get a big payday. So she's doing a lot of things that she's just not ethically into that much. She feels bad about bilking these people. So there's just a bunch of pages of them. We see all their various various scams and grifts. And they're doing great, though. They're succeeding well. Molly and his relationship is deteriorating. We also find out that, like, you know, Stan isn't right in the head. Stan is, even though he's on top of the world, he's got this beautiful girlfriend. He's just making more and more money every day. He's getting respect. But he's completely has this insecurity complex. You know, he continues to have these nightmares. He's this guy could, like, you know, he's never going to be happy. He seems like that kind of guy. Man, look at this panel here. God, those trees are amazing. And it looks like his mental stability is, he's losing it. And in this scene, he goes to this one place and he has this tantrum, like a psychotic tantrum. He just destroys this whole room. I mean, so he's really, he's definitely losing it. He's just holding on by a thread. So he goes to see a psychologist, which I would have told him to do 20 years ago. I mean, he's a head case. And here we meet Dr. Lilith Ritter. And just look at her. You know she's going to be a femme fatale. Typical film noir, femme fatale. Really weird scene where he just grabs her. He pretends to trip, but really he's just so taken with her. He's just like, oh my God, I just want to grab her. And she totally throws him with like a judo move. And then she just continues to talk to him calmly. So we realize this woman is just like, she's not your average woman. She's like this dominatrix, basically. So she starts analyzing him. And, of course, we see another flashback to his childhood. I guess this one is very telling. Young Stan wanted this magic kit really bad. His mom would never buy it for him. One day he was out in the woods on a Thursday, the day that his mom had music lessons. He was out in the woods with his poorly drawn dog. Look at that. That's so terrible. Oh, my God. And he comes across his mother having sex with that music teacher. And when he gets home, not that the father knows for sure, but he's totally suspects something's up. Because I guess a nosy neighbor saw her and the music teacher, you know, their car pull off into the woods. So he's like, what? And she's just like, it was just an innocent picnic. So she tells Stan, young Stan, to lie for her and say, Stan, Daddy will be less mad if you tell him you were in the car with us and we all went on a picnic together. And he does. He lies to his father. And it works. And so the mother buys him the magic set the next day. So it's almost like at a very young age, Stan learned that lying and cheating, you could be rewarded for doing it. And even as a kid, he didn't like the feeling that his mother got him this just because, like, almost like hush money, you know? And it's the first time they met. This is so strange. Like, obviously, she's the new mommy figure in his life. Look at him. He's just got his head in her lap. He's calling her mother. And she's just calmly saying, lie back on the couch. Get off me. So even though it's such a weird relationship, but they obviously start a sexual relationship. They don't really show it, but they do show they're like, they got this kinky thing going on. So at one point, Stan realizes that in her like locked desk drawer, there's like a lot of incriminating information. All the rich and powerful people who come to her, they've admitted things to her. Of course, she can't talk about it, the Hippocratic Oath, you know, or whatever that's called in psychology. But he basically tries to steal them. And she catches him. And instead of just like saying, get the fuck out, I never want to see you again, we realize just the extent of their strange relationship. She makes him paint his toenails. And look how hot this is. I'm sorry. I'm not even into this kind of S&M stuff, or BDSM, but Man, Spain knows how to draw some kinky stuff. It's like his big bitch comics. And she's totally scolding him, and looks like he's loving it, being on his knees in front of her. So she basically says, you know, I'm going to turn you on to a lead. One of the rich, powerful people I know of in my circles. We could totally pull a scam on this guy. So she hatches this plan, but Stan does all the legwork. And we realize just how clever Stan is. He goes to newspaper morgue files. He goes to libraries, does all this research, and figures out this elaborate secret of this rich guy. And he's almost like a private detective. He's just really good at it. And so he pulls some strings and he gets this guy. I think his name's Grindel. He gets him to come to one of his masses. I'm sorry, guys, I forgot to mention the latest grift that Stan is doing. He started his own church, and it's like a mixture of Christianity and occultism, where he still does his medium business, talking to people, but, you know, supposedly they're in heaven and he can communicate with them. So he's doing really well with it. He's got all these followers and, you know, taking all their money. And so this rich industrialist, Grindel, shows up at one of his masses just to hear. This guy is a hard-bitten, mean-spirited, you know, just magnate. And it's implied that he's pretty corrupt, too. Like, he's got agents out there, like Pinkerton types. He's probably tied in with the mob. He's a union-busting, corrupt industrialist. But with the information he gleaned, Stan basically does a cold reading on him. He pretends he's just giving a sermon, but he's talking about Grindel with all the information he knows. And by the end of the mass, this hard-bitten guy is weeping into his own hands. So Stan got to him. Later on, they talk, and of course, this guy is a businessman, so he basically wants proof. He wants to test him. And so Stan's going to need Molly for this scam. And I don't even get this test, to be honest, but it's some kind of weird thing where there's a scale and I don't know, Stan has to affect it in some way, and that'll prove that he's in touch with the spirit world. I didn't quite understand it, to be honest. But apparently it works. And Grindel is all in now. Gives him a nice fat check. And Stan goes back to the psychiatrist. And they plot some more. I love panels like this where just Spain just draw on this neon lights and old-time cities, you know. Spain is such a good choice for this graphic novel, I think. It's just because, you know, all those tales he did of bikers and, you know, growing up in Buffalo in the 50s. It's just like, it seems like he's good at drawing seedy scenery and seedy people. Also, just his art style for noir. I mean, Spain would be good for any noir, I think. His style is noir. So Stan decides to visit his father, who he hasn't seen in years. And the father's trying to basically be like, oh, let bygones be bygones. But Stan's not there for that. He wants to confront his dad. We realize his father was way worse than we thought. He used to just beat his son with a leather strap daily and brutally. And also he killed Jip, the dog. The father basically killed him. And then didn't just like, he always told him that he had to kill Jip. You know, he did it like with poison gas or something, chlorophyll. But Stan finds evidence that he actually abused the dog for a while. And he confronts his dad. And of course the father's just like, what are you talking about? And it looks like he's having a heart attack. God, that's such a great hand there. You don't even need to see the father having a heart attack. You can tell by his hand having a seizure or something. And so Stan just runs out into the night. He's like, yeah, fuck this guy. Another great panel there. So Stan does more, shenanigans that really convince Grindle that he's the real deal. Basically, the whole thing is that Stan is planning to build this glorious religious spiritual city in the Arizona desert. And he's trying to get Grindle to finance it, give him lots of money. Of course, he's not going to build a city. He just wants to, he's grifting him. And he even gets Molly to dress up as his old girlfriend. That's basically the gist of this guy's problem. Grindle, when he was young, he dated a woman, got her pregnant. She died in the childbirth. And before she died, though, when she was in the hospital, he ran to see her, and she was like, blamed him for everything. Said, I don't even want to see you. Get out of here. So just the guilt of that whole experience has plagued him his whole life. Even though he's a very successful man, he's been ridden with guilt. And that's why he's such a sucker for Stan's, bullshit. Because Stan is basically promising, you'll not only see Dory again, that's her name, but when I build the city, or soon, I will be able to make her corporealize into material form, and you'll actually get to hold her again. So Molly and Stan go on a vacation, and it looks like for the first time in months they're happy. But, of course, that's not going to last. Stan is never going to be happy. So he gets Molly to do this. This is going to be the big heist. Not the big heist, but, the big grift, the long grift, where, he promises Molly, if you help me with this one, we'll make enough money that we'll never have to work again. We can retire. Because it's a big ask. He's basically asking Molly once again to play Dory, Grindle's old girlfriend. But this time, he's like, yeah, you're going to have sex with him. You're going to supposedly be a ghost made real. And he's going to be able to, be with you again. So Stan has got the money from Grindle. He runs to Lilith's office. She says, oh, you can't walk around with that much money. I'll put it in my safe. It's like $150,000 or something, which is a hell of a lot back then. And then he runs off to, finish the scam. We see Grindle's flashback to meeting Dory and how in love they were. And so Stan sets this whole thing up with even fog machines and stuff, and makes it look like, and Molly here, she's got her head turned so he can't really see her face, but she's naked. And it's so weird that deep down it looks like Grindle just wanted to have sex with her again. He just starts groping her, and he just can't believe it. And then Molly can't go through with it, and Molly breaks character. She says, Stan, get me out of here. Stan just slugs her. He's like, you ruined everything. And then he knows that Grindle's going to be like, what? Has this all been a scam? And he just runs in and slugs Grindle. Grindle passes out, And this is a really interesting sequence, the writing here, because it's apparently Grindel has a stroke. He talks about how one of his arms is numb. He can't really talk because half his face is numb. And it's so interesting from his point of view as someone having a stroke. It's really interestingly written. Like, he's really confused and befuddled. Almost makes me feel like, oh, that's what it would feel like if you had a stroke. How your thoughts would go. I love this panel here. Look at that ink slinging. It's a nice one. So he runs back to Lilith's office. She says, "Here, take your money, and I'll meet up with you later." Of course, you did the old switcheroo, and when he gets to this place to open it up, he finds out it's all $1 bills. It's basically a fraction of the money. Man, I love this. Remember I was talking about how the depth thing, it's just the outlines, but so beautifully drawn of these old buildings. So Stan furiously rushes back to Lilith's office. And obviously he just wants to, I don't know, kill her or something. But it's so interesting, like what an amazing personality she is. She just starts basically concluding her analysis of him. Basically just tells him, yeah, you got this whole mommy thing. You saw Grindel as a father figure. And, you know, it just totally breaks him down until he's just blubbering. Just with her words, just her analysis of him. And it's almost like he has a breakthrough, but it's a bad one, where he realizes what a piece of shit he is. So basically he knows that Grindel's men, like I said earlier, Grindel has like 200 agents. They're almost like thugs, you know? So he basically knows that Grindel's men are going to be looking for him. So he's just on the run. He totally ditches Molly. Not that he ever really cared about her. I love this panel here, echoing that nightmare sequence from page 1. But it's the whole city now. All these arms reaching out at him. Just a beautifully drawn panel. Look at this here, too. It's like very Ditko. These floating eyes staring at him. Just totally exemplifies his paranoid state of mind. And so obviously time has passed, and it looks like Stan has turned to the bottle. We see him here getting an altercation with a hobo. Blinds him with a burning stick. And then he runs to catch a train. And it looks like he's going to slip under the wheels. He's like, oh shit, I miscalculated. And all of a sudden this hand grabs his wrist and pulls him up and saves his life. And it's this guy. I don't think we ever find his name. But as he talks to him, Stan actually tries to grift him. Like, you know, lay his spiel on him. And the guy's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I don't believe in all that shit. And we find out from his words that he's like a labor agitator. You know, he's talking about the working man. And all of a sudden the train is stopped when it's not supposed to. And so he thinks it's Grindel's men. But it turns out it's the police looking for that black guy, the labor agitator. And Stan totally gives him up. The guy is actually hiding in the wheels. And he escapes once the train continues on. But just once again, we realize Stan has no ethics at all. He's a little weasel. They basically tell him that, like, yeah, we might be able to throw a little money your way if you give us some information. And all I can think of already, he's such an alcoholic, all I can think of is like, ooh, that'll buy me a few bottles. So now we see even more time has passed. He's really fallen. He's just trying to do 3-card Monte in this big city. And his voice is hoarse. All of his charm is gone, so he's terrible at it. This cop tries to tell him to move along. And then he just whacks him in the head, and Stan loses it, and he kills the cop. And he runs away, and he ends up at Zena's house. He finds out where Zena lives. Zena's now settled down, living with Joe, the guy with no legs. And she kind of scolds him. She said, you know, Molly came back to the circus, and we know how you treated her. I should punch you in the face. But she still, you can tell, kind of likes the guy. I mean, Zena's just a sweet woman. She just seems to see the best in everyone, or at least give people a second chance. It doesn't hurt that he collapses, and so she's worried about him. So they feed him, they bathe him, they give him a new set of clothes, and turns out that Molly is totally happily married and has a kid. So, so Joe, even though he knows how terrible Stan was to Molly, he gives him this banner. He said, hey, you got to get back on your feet. You'd be good at this. You know, do the a la Rajid act. You know, put a turban on your head, crystal ball. You can do this, you know, get a good job. But there's a carnival down the way. I know they're hiring. And so even though after all he's done, he's still got these friends who are trying to help him out. They even give him money for a bus ticket. He arrives in this other town where the carnival is, and the first thing he does is goes to a bar. But he tries to be good. He says, if I just stick to beer, I'll be okay. I'll have a couple beers. But while he's at the bar, he looks down at the counter and he sees a newspaper. Psychologist weds magnate. Lilith Ritter weds steel magnate Simon Grindle today. Oh, man. I think the kids would call that a burn, a sick burn. So we see his face. He's just shocked to his core. And with what little money he has, he says, give me rye, give me some whiskey, make it a double rye. And he just goes on a bender. 3 days later, he finally runs out of money probably. And he goes to the carnival. It's so sad. He can barely speak. He's still drunk, even though he's hungover too. And the manager of the circus says, we don't hire boozers. It smells like you pissed your pants. Get out of here. And then he says, wait a minute. You know, we do have one job that you might want to take a crack at. It'll keep you in coffee and cake and a shot now and then. It's temporary only until we get a real geek. And those are the exact words that the carnival barker from the beginning of the story told Stan. That's how they lure you in. And we see Stan turn away, and then we see him shake, and then we see him turn back. And you know he's going to say yes, and he's going to end up as a circus geek. I love this ending, just the subtle, they don't need to show us, you know, his total fall. In the movie, you actually see it. You actually see, which is kind of shocking, but this is way more interesting, the way the novel does it and Spain adapts it. So that's it for Nightmare Alley, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed looking at this. This is a great story. I mean, I pretty much know the gist of what was going to happen, so it took away a little of the thrill, because, you know, I saw the movie. But this is different than the movie. It's adapted from the novel. But it was still a great read. And I imagine if I had no idea where the story was going, it would have been a lot more interesting, you know? But I loved it. I read it last night, and I had a great time reading this again. So I guess that's it for today's video, guys. And I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.